Gracias. Le pedimos a Richard Gerver que no se nos vaya muy lejos porque la conferencia inaugural de las jornadas corre a cargo de uno de los mayores expertos mundiales en el ámbito de la educación. Es doctor en educación por la Universidad de Derby, escritor y asesor en materia educativa del gobierno británico. Sin embargo, a él le gusta ser presentado como un director de un centro educativo cualquiera. Obtuvo un merecido reconocimiento internacional por su trabajo como director de un centro en el que aplicó un exitoso plan para motivar a los alumnos y también a los docentes, combatiendo con eficacia el alto índice de fracaso que presentaba. Es ganador del Premio Nacional de Enseñanza en el Reino Unido y autor de la influyente obra Crear hoy, la escuela del mañana. Tenemos el placer, señoras y señores, de presentarles a Richard Gerver.
Perfect. Thank you. Hola. Good morning. First, let me say thank you to you. Thank you for giving up your Saturday, your holiday, to be here today. This shows me the commitment, the dedication, the love you have as teachers. So before we start this morning, I want you all to give yourselves a big clap for being here today. You know, this year is a very special one for me. It is 10 years since I left my job as a school principal and as a teacher. The job I loved, the only job I thought I would ever have. 10 years since I finished. Because this is a special time for me, I have spent a lot of time thinking about the last 10 years. And I'm going to share some of the thoughts I've had thinking about the last 10 years, and in particular about education. And I want to start this morning by sharing one of my biggest concerns. As I travel around the world, as I talk to teachers, I see how education is trying to change and be better for our students in preparing them for their future. I am a little bit worried. And I'm a little bit worried because I think that in the desperate desire to change and move forwards and to be better, which everyone in this room wants to be, I worry that we have made education complicated. To me, teaching is a simple art. It's about human beings. It's about emotions. It's about human development. And because the world is becoming so complicated, I worry that we as educators, that education has to be complicated too. The whole world seems to believe that for things to be good, they need to be complicated. And when I look back on the last 10 years of my life, everywhere I travel, not just in education, but outside of education too, I fear that people are making the same mistakes. They keep looking for complicated. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I was here. This is the world's first Starbucks restaurant. This is in Seattle, in America. I was in Seattle to do some work for Microsoft. And on my day off, I thought I have to visit the world's first Starbucks. It's like a mecca. I love coffee. So I think I have to go to the world's first Starbucks. So this is the shop, and I am queuing maybe 2 kilometers from the shop. People are queuing. Hours we're waiting outside Starbucks. Right? As I get closer to Starbucks, something scary happens. Because this is the world's first Starbucks, and the people in the queue have come from all over the world for their Starbucks coffee. These people don't love coffee, they love Starbucks. So they're queuing. And as I get to the door, I start to hear what's happening inside the shop. And as people reach the counter to order their coffee, they're ordering amazing things. Now, let me explain. I like coffee. Solo. Sin leche. Solo coffee, simple, easy, right? This is what I like, proper coffee. These people are ordering coffee like they are an urban poet or a rap star. They're walking into Starbucks and they're going, yo, I want a soya latte grande, extra hot. What is extra hot? They're giving the list of the things they want. And everybody, because it's America, people give their order, and then everyone in the queue is going, yo, yeah, woo! I'm getting closer to the front of the queue, and all I'm going to order is cafe solo. I get really scared because I know what's going to happen, right? The person behind the till, the counter, is going to go, yo, man, what do you want? And all these other people are going to go, and I'm going to go, a cup of coffee, please. I got so scared, I didn't actually make it into the shop. I ran away. And as I'm running away, I'm thinking to myself, why has the world become so complicated? Why do we seem to think that in order for things to be good, in order for things to have value, that they have to be complicated? And you know, this for me is one of the great problems with education. I would imagine that everyone in this room wants to be a great teacher. Everyone in this room loves their students. But I also imagine that many of you are scared and worried because you don't understand so much of the language that is being used around education. I fear that when I listen to many experts talk about education today, I don't understand half of what they're talking about. And it makes me feel nervous because I'm supposed to be a teacher. So the anxiety and the pressure grows. And so today, in my time with you, I want to take us back. I want to take us back to simple things. I want to take us back to simple things that I think are going to make the real difference for our students, not just today, but tomorrow too. And I am so proud to be here with you today to share and think about the very soul of education, the very deep part of what really makes the difference to human beings. So let me take you back. Let me take you back to my earliest memory as a child in education. I don't have many memories. I find that the older I get, the harder the memories become. But I remember one thing very clearly. It was 1976. And I was 7 years old. And by the way, thank you. I know I don't, but thank you. Don't laugh. And I was in my urban school, my primary school, in London. So we didn't have much land or area around us. It was an urban school. And I remember it was 1976 because it's the only time in England we've ever seen the sunshine. You may, if you were alive, remember it was the only year that the British didn't come here and get drunk. We got drunk at home that year. It was lovely. So I was 7 years old, and it was a hot summer in England. And I remember one day having lunch in school and then going back to my classroom with my teacher, and it was hot. It was really hot. And we went back to the classroom, and we're 7-year-olds, and you know, those of you that teach 7-year-old children, you know what 7-year-old children are like after lunch on a hot day. First, they smell. It's just true. And also they sit there like this. And on this particular afternoon, we'd had lunch, it was hot, and we were supposed to be doing math. Well, I loved my teacher that year. She was amazing. I remember being in the classroom, sitting there, thinking, I don't want to do math. And my teacher came into the classroom and she said, "Children, isn't it a beautiful day?" And we went, uh-huh. And she said, "Do you want to do math this afternoon?" And we went, huh? She said, "Or would you like to walk across the road to the public park and go and sit under a tree?" Well, what do you think we said? Who wants to do math? Uh-oh. There was one child. You know the one child we all hate because they're so clever? Everyone in the class going, This one, yes! We're all going, no. The one child lost. We went to the park to sit under the tree. And you know, this is the thing, because I genuinely don't remember massive amounts of being a young child, but this is so clear that as I talk to you today, I remember it as if it happened yesterday. We went to the park and we found a tree and we lay down under the tree. And I remember feeling the grass on the back of my neck. I can feel it now. I remember the leaves of the tree just gently swaying in the breeze. I remember the warmth, and I remember my teacher's voice as she read us a story. I was 7. And as a 7-year-old child, I think that moment was one of the most powerful moments of learning in my whole life. Because as I looked up into the tree, I remember thinking to myself, life will never get better than this. Now, this is one of the things when I reflect on what I mean by simplicity that I think we need to remember as we move into the future of education. The future of education doesn't just have to be about new ideas. It doesn't just have to be about technology or new curriculum or new skills or all the complex things about the brain and learning that we keep talking about. That some of the greatest moments in education now are the same as the greatest moments in education 40 years ago. Because they touch the soul. They are about the development of human beings. This, and I'm not going to spend ages today talking about it, this was the school where I was a school principal. This is my little school. And I do want to share a couple of thoughts with you, because it's been a very long time since I told teachers about some of what we did. I'm not going to tell you the details, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we started our journey. Because I want you to do today, amongst all of the things that you're going to hear and talk about, is before you allow yourself to be drowned by complexity and new things, I want you to use some of the time while I'm talking now to reflect back on what really matters to you as a teacher here. What gets your blood pumping? What gets your heart moving? Because the school that I took over here was, when I took it over, one of the worst schools in the United Kingdom. The British government thought the school was so bad that they were about to close it down. Interestingly, the only person that didn't know that the British government were going to close it down was me. I went in the school. I was working at the time on a different project, and I went into the school and fell in love. I fell in love with the school, I fell in love with the students, I fell in love with the teachers. There had been no school principal for nearly 2 years. In the last 10 years, there had been 8 school principals. This place was a dangerous place for school principals. School principals didn't last in this school. Anyway, I fell in love with this school, and I went back to the local government and I said, look, I know there's a vacancy for the school principal's job in this school. And they went, yeah. I said, well, I'd like to apply. And they went, Anyway, I applied, and as you all know now, I got the job. Now, I didn't get the job because I was brilliant. I wasn't brilliant. I got the job because I was breathing. And I was the only person to apply for the job because I was the only person that didn't know the government were going to shut the school down. The local Minister of Education only told me that the government planned to shut the school down after I signed my contract. Anyway, it was an amazing time. I tell you that just so you understand that the school had been suffering for many years. It had done really badly. And when I walked in there, I found out that over the last 10 years, experts had come into the school and made the teachers do new systems and new curriculum and new tests and prepare tests and more tests and more tests. This is what the school had been for 10 years. And when I walked in, I saw teachers who were exhausted. Teachers who had been teaching, some of them, for many years, but the light had gone out in their eyes. They were like robots. Now they turned up every day, and they knew their school was failing, and they knew the students hated it, and they knew the parents hated it, and they knew the government hated them. This is not a good environment for success. And I know that the teachers in this school were expecting me to be angry with them, to shout at them, to whip them, to give them more systems and more tests, and to fire those that weren't performing properly, because that's what all the other school principals had done. Now, I was young, I was naive, and these are good qualities to have when you become a school principal, because you have no idea what can happen to you if you get it wrong. So, I remember walking into my first meeting, and my staff, there were 100 teachers and other staff. There were 100 members of staff in this room. And they were all sat there in this room. You'll recognize these people. You will work with teachers like this. I call these teachers wasp swallowers. They sit in meetings like this. And there were 100 of these people sat in this room going, some of them had started taking bets on how long I'd last as the school principal. And I walked into the room, young and full of enthusiasm. Hi! And they're all going. And I have to be honest, as I looked into their eyes, I should have had courage. I should have been strong. I should have been proud. But I was just scared. I looked at these people, and they were like assassins of hope. Right? I don't know if you've ever seen those horror films where evil things suck the energy out of good creatures. This is what was happening in this room. It was like, right? Now, I should have told them off. I should have told them that we weren't doing well enough and that we needed to improve the academic results of our children. But I was too scared. And what happened next is something I've become well known for, particularly in the United Kingdom. Because what came out of my mouth next may have seemed a little bit stupid, But as it turns out, it was probably the most important thing in our school's history. But it didn't come from me being brilliant or clever or courageous. It came from me being scared. And I just didn't know what else to say. So I said to my staff, how do we turn our school into somewhere as exciting as Disneyland? Now think about that for a minute. Why should school not be as exciting as Disneyland? Because what happens in school is more exciting than what happens in Disneyland. Because in school, we're a place where we should be firing children's ambition, aspiration, dreams, beliefs. We should be giving them the skills and the knowledge that allow them to live amazing lives. Schools are more magical than Disneyland. This is what I was thinking. But my teachers, not so much. Every school, and please don't look at them now, this would be embarrassing. Every school has one teacher that I call the alpha teacher. They are the heart of evil in every school. Don't look at them now. I can see you. Some of you are going, Alpha teacher, hashtag. I can see it. Every school has one, right? You know those teachers who are in charge. The school principal think they're in charge. The leadership team think they're in charge. But the alpha teacher scares everybody. They can be a man, they can be a woman, but they are in control. You know what I mean? In meetings, somebody says something, and everybody immediately looks to the alpha teacher. So this is what we're thinking of doing. Everyone goes, oh, what do you think? And the alpha teacher is usually sat there in the corner going, and everyone else goes, no. So I say, how do we turn our school into Disneyland? The alpha teacher in this school happened to be a man. And he sat in the corner like a ninja, waiting to assassinate all hope. Right? How do we turn our school into Disneyland? Why would we want to turn our school into Disneyland? I hate Disneyland. I didn't know what to say. What do you say? He said, I've been to Disneyland. I've taken my grandchildren to Disneyland. It's a horrible place. Now, also in the room with me was a young, newly qualified teacher. Do you remember being a young, newly qualified teacher? Do you remember those days when everything was wonderful? We would skip into school. I'm a newly qualified teacher. I love my walls. I love my desks. I love my children. I love my job. We had one of these teachers Now, I need to tell you something honestly. This year, my wife will have been married to me for 25 years. Poor woman. 25 years my wife and I will have been married this year. That's why she lets me so much. Bye. Now, I need to be honest with you. And this is true, okay? I have never in all my life ever loved another woman apart from my wife. I promise. No, really, I promise. Thank you. Apart from this moment. Because in this moment here, with Mr. Miserable and my newly qualified teacher, she didn't know the rules yet. You know what I mean? The new teacher didn't know that if the alpha teacher said something, everybody else had to agree. This was the moment I fell in love with another woman, because she opened her mouth. Everyone else is sat there going, she goes, oh! How can you say that? I love Disneyland. She said, I love Disneyland so much. She said, my boyfriend and I have just been there on holiday. And we've decided, she said, that when we get married, we're going to get married at Disneyland. Well, alpha teacher now is going, I'm going to eat you. She ignored him. She carried on. God, I love this woman. She said, you know what my boyfriend and I noticed? She said, there are people who are miserable at Disneyland, but it's never the children. The people who you see who are miserable at Disneyland are always the adults. She said, you go on a ride, you queue for 2 hours in the heat, waiting to go on a ride that lasts maybe 2 minutes. And as you come off the ride, adults are going, not again. We bribe our children. We say things like, sweeties, as many sweeties as you want. Pop, fizzy drinks, anything, e-numbers, whatever you want, just don't make me queue up again. Because the children come off the ride, and their first thing they say is, let's do it again, right? As adults, it's like, no. 2 years ago, we went to Disney, my family and I, in Florida. My daughter, at the time, was 20 years old. But she made me queue for 3.5 hours to see some princess. From Scandinavia. Let it go. Never again. But my young teacher had a point. And actually, what followed that afternoon and that meeting was extraordinary. Because what she went on to say was, Disney isn't perfect. It isn't magical 100% of the time. In fact, it's a place where children have to do really tough things. They have to do tough things a lot. But at Disney, there is something so special about the feel of the place that children are prepared to go through the tough stuff because there's magic somewhere in the building. Now, when you think about it that way, suddenly it's not such a stupid conversation. Because the one thing we know is that learning is hard. Learning should be tough. Because learning is all about realizing you don't know things, that you can't do things, that you have to have the courage to fail and to try again. That's what learning is. One of the things I've said for many years is that you learn nothing new by getting something right. You only ever learn something new at the point of a mistake. When you don't know something, when you can't do something. So learning is tough, and it needs to be tough. But how do you create an environment where children are queuing up and they're prepared to go through the tough stuff? So let's take it back just a little bit. And let me ask you to consider 3 important questions, which I think make a really powerful difference. Simple things. So, in the last 10 years, I've had the chance to work with Disney. I've had the chance to work with some amazing organizations, very cool organizations. Organizations where they have the magic. Where there are tough places to work, but there's a magic, there's an excitement, there's a spirit of creativity and innovation. And one of the things they all have in common is they spend a lot of time talking about how the environment should feel for its people, both its customers and its staff. And I think these are 3 very interesting questions that as educators we should be asking all of the time. The first is this: before you truly develop a culture and systems in your school or your education system, you have to achieve clarity. One of the problems with education over the last 30 or 40 years is there has been so much change, so many new ideas, that I think one of the things that many people have forgotten is clarity. When I talk to senior national politicians about education, none of them have any clarity. Everything is about, but we've got to be better than Finland. We've got to be better than China. Well, what does that mean, actually? There's a different question, which I'll come back to in a while, that I want us to ask. But the first is, what do we actually stand for? Now, we can ask that question on so many levels. As a school, as an education system, who are our customers? Our customers are our children. Nobody else. Not parents, not politicians, not businesses. Our only customers are our children. Because the truth is, if children don't buy what we're selling, our school can look good, we can have nice uniforms, we can say the right things to parents, But if the children don't buy what we're selling, then you don't have a school. So, what do you want to stand for in the eyes of your children? When they're walking through the door every morning, what do you want them to feel? Think about Disney. Disney know exactly how they want children to feel. And every decision they take is based on making children feel that way. How do we do that? If when your children get up in the morning and it's a Monday morning, how do you want them to feel as they're getting ready to come to school? How do you want them to feel when they walk through the gates? How do you want them to feel when they walk into your classroom? We have to have clarity. And that helps, because if we understand how we want school to feel for our students, then we can ask the next question, which is about coherence. How do we make sure that our behaviors as staff match what we want to achieve for our children? You see, many of the places I've visited over the last 10 years in education talk a lot about creativity and risk. I hear it all the time. Innovation, creativity, risk, curiosity. And sometimes I walk into schools where they say things like, our students aren't creative, they're not curious. My students aren't prepared for risk. And then I listen to the teachers talk to each other. And some of those teachers are sat there saying, well, I don't want that, that's a bit dangerous. I don't want to do that, that makes me feel uncomfortable. I can't do that because so-and-so says I can't do that. And I think to myself, if you want your students to be creative and innovative and prepared to take risks, then the first people that have to be prepared to be creative and innovative and prepared to take risks are us, the teachers. We can't expect children to do things we're not prepared to do. We can't tell them to do stuff we're not prepared to do. We can't behave in a way that we expect our children to behave. We need to be the same. We need to be creative and innovative. We need to be risk takers. If we truly value our kids above all things, we need to have the courage to value our children above everything else. Our behavior becomes so important. And that leads to the third word, which is about leadership. And I'm not talking about the leaders in a school so much here, the principals and the senior leadership team and the boards and the local government ministers. I'm talking about as teachers. Because one of the things I've noticed about great teachers is that great teachers are probably the best leaders in the world. Anywhere. In any organization at any level. You know, when I go and talk to the senior leadership team at Microsoft, I don't have magic in my head. All I do is I talk to them as a teacher. All I do is talk to them about how they should manage their people in the way that we manage our children. One of the things I beg you to consider is actually how brilliant you are. Because most teachers don't. Maybe the media or society or our level of pay make us feel low. We always feel that somehow we're not as good as people out there in the real world. And I'm here to tell you different. I'm here to tell you that the best of you could lead any organization in the world probably better than anybody out there. I mean, think about it. How difficult could it be to be president of the United States of America if Donald Trump can do it? anyone in this room can do a better job than Donald Trump. Anyway, so here's the thing. Clarity, coherence, leadership. We have to get these things right. There's no point just throwing new ideas on top of everything else we're already doing, because all it'll do is make you drown. It'll make you drown under more and more and more and more and more new ideas. But the more ideas that are thrown on top of you, the further you go from your passion and your vision and your values. So let's take a step back and start again with the simple, simple stuff. And here's my simple stuff. 3 words which have driven my education beliefs all of my career. I don't expect them to be yours, but I want you to think about yours and how simple you can make them. So the 3 words that drive my education belief are these. Number 1, living. I passionately believe, of all things, our job as educators is to help our children celebrate life. Not life tomorrow or in the future or one day if they do well in a test, but to celebrate life. When we think about it, why is there education? Why is education so important? Why is education so important for those of us that have dedicated our lives to teaching in areas of social complexity, of challenge? Because what we know is that education is the only way to democratize chance. It is the only way we can help young people come from where they are and go to where they dream. It is a celebration of life. It is not purgatory. And sometimes I worry that school is like some kind of holding cell where children go until they're grown up and then they can be real people. Here's a challenge for you. Why is it okay to treat children in a way we would never dream of treating adults? You think about some of the routines in the school day. As an adult, you would never be prepared to put up with some of what we expect our children to put up with. Why? Because they're younger than us? We need to remember that education needs to be a celebration of life. There was a book I read at the turn of the millennium, and it's a book called The School I'd Like. And it was written by 2 professors of education, Catherine Burke and Ian Grosvenor, both British professors of education. And what they did was they travelled around the United Kingdom, talking to young people between the ages of 5 and 18. And they asked them the simple question, what would your ideal school look like? And they discussed everything from curriculum and rules to meals and behavior and uniform, everything. And it's a wonderful book. Very, very provocative. And there's a quote in this book from a young woman who I think said the most provocative thing I've ever heard said about education, ever. She was 16 years old when she was asked the question, what would your ideal school look like? And this was her answer. I want you to think about this deeply. She said, in my ideal school, we will no longer be treated like a herd of identical wild animals, waiting to be civilized for the outside world. You will realize and respect that it's my world too. I think when we think about the very soul and purpose of education, we need to remember this. Schools aren't ours. Schools are theirs. They're our customers. We need to remember that our job is to serve our children, not for our children to serve us. I think we need to remember that in everything we plan to teach, in everything we try to impart to our students, knowledge, skills, behavior, we need to remember that it has to matter to them. And this brings me on to my second word. Because my second word is learning. Now, no one can argue that the core of helping to develop children's understanding of the power of life is through learning. But again, we need to remember, I think, that it's simply not good enough to turn to our students and say, if you learn this now, one day it will help you become something. I've heard teachers say to 7-year-olds, if you learn this now, when you're a grown-up, it will help you get a good job. Now, 7-year-olds don't care about good jobs. 7-year-olds want to go and dance and play football all the time, or maybe pick their nose occasionally. This is what 7-year-olds do. You can have a good job when you're older if you study hard now. Okay. What? No idea. What are you talking about? What is university? I don't care. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't even know what a lawyer is. We have to make learning matter for children now. There's a wonderful old American educator and writer and thinker, one of the most inspirational education voices of his age, a man called John Holt. And John Holt retired many years ago, but he was a great champion of innovation and change in education. And when he was coming to his own retirement, his wife knew that he had one dream left in his life. And it was his greatest regret. She knew that he'd always wanted to play a musical instrument. So as a surprise, she arranged for him to have music lessons. And the instrument he really wanted to learn to play was the cello. So she arranged for him to have cello lessons. And he started having his lessons, and he loved them. And after a few weeks, he was having a cup of coffee with his teacher, and she was saying to him, "John, this is marvelous. I'm enjoying teaching you. Are you having fun?" And he said, "It's marvelous. It's my dream. I'm loving working with you, learning to play the cello." He said, "In fact, I have one question for you." He said, "For months now, I'm saying to my friends that I'm learning to play the cello." He said, "My one question is this. When can I stop telling my friends that I'm learning to play the cello? When can I tell them I'm playing the cello?" Think about that for a moment. We spend so long telling our children they are learning to one day live life. Really skilled teachers don't do that. Really skilled teachers make the learning feel that it makes a difference to children today, now, so that they're actually living their lives. And here's my third, and I don't have anything clever to say to you about this word, but it's laughing. Have you noticed that so often when people are talking about education, particularly politicians and policymakers, they do this? "Oh, education. Education's very, 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 very serious." Education matters. Education is all about discipline. Have you noticed this? They always do this. And there are teachers too. Don't look at them now. There are teachers too who think the way you teach children is like this. Sit down. Stop talking. Look at me. Where are you going? Isn't it scary? We all do it even now. We're all professionals, right? And if your teacher walked into the room now, you'd go, Here's the thing, right? Education is really important. I've said that. Nobody thinks differently. Education is the greatest gift a civilized society can give to its young people. It is the heart of civilization. But why does it have to be so serious all the time? Learning should be fun, it should be exciting, it should be dynamic. I don't know about you, but because I'm a teacher, I often have my friends come to see me and say, my child is about to start school. What should I be looking for? How do I know which school to send them to? And I always say the same thing to them. They expect me to talk about exam results. I always say to them, go and choose 3 or 4 schools that you're interested in. And then go and stand in the corridor of those schools. And if you don't hear laughter in the first minute, turn around and walk away. Leave. So here's a question to ask as a school. If you've never done it before, as a community of schools, if you've never done it before, this makes a really interesting question. What do you want your students to look like as human beings when they leave your school, when they leave your school community, when they leave your education system? When children from China go on and travel the world and make a difference for themselves, and they make a mark in history, in business, in society, in charity, in good causes, in the arts, wouldn't it be wonderful if people could identify the children of Cartagena because of their attitudes and behaviors? Wouldn't it be brilliant if they could say, I bet you were educated there, weren't you? How do I know? Because of the way you behave. When I was the head teacher of my primary school, I had lunch one day with the head teacher, the school principal of my local secondary school. And he said to me, he said, what's your plan? I said, my plan is to create students for you that you can identify as having come from my school without knowing they've come from my school. And 3 years later, I walked him around his school. And I set him the challenge. I said, as we walk through the classrooms, I want you to see if you can point out the students that came from my little school. And you know what? 100% he got right. That child, that child, that child, that child. Why? Because as a school, we didn't just focus on filling their minds. We focused on creating whole human beings. And you can't do that by accident. So if you decide, by the time my students reach 18, they need to be like this as human beings, you can work backwards and say, okay, by 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, what do we need to do to make sure that our students have those behaviors? They have those attitudes. They have those skills. That, to me, is how we build an education system for the future. I'm going to move on. I want to talk to you about this because I think this is hugely important for all of us. When we think about those behaviors, when we think about the skills and attitudes we need our children to have, I've mentioned this already. I want us to spend a few minutes thinking deeply about this. So one of the other things that I've had the privilege of doing over the last 10 years is working in elite sports. I mean, look at me. Why are you laughing? This is the body of an athlete here. You can imagine, can't you? When I first walked in to work with the British Olympic team, they were looking at me going, what is he doing here, right? I think they thought maybe I was the chef. Anyway, I've been working in a lot of sports in the UK, and one of the reasons they got me involved to work in sports in the UK was because of a very interesting problem in British sports. I mean, apart from the fact we just rubbish at everything, apart from that. Apparently, we have some of the most talented athletes in the world up until the age of 12. So here's a thought. Think of tennis. The only famous British tennis player you can all think of is Andy Murray. Why? Because he's the only British tennis player that's won anything in the last 60 years. But the interesting thing is that when you look at the under 12 tennis players in the world, most of the best are British. But something happens between the age of 12 and as they grow to the next stage. And most of them drop out of sports. It happens in soccer, the same happens in rugby, in a number of other British sports. High-performing children very rarely make it to the top. Now this interested me, because I'd seen a similar pattern happening in highly gifted academic children. Did you know, now Oxford and Cambridge are probably our two most famous universities. They have the brightest children from all over the world going to Oxford and Cambridge University. In the last 20 years, they have had to quadruple the number of psychiatrists at Oxford and Cambridge University because of the rapid rise in mental health problems, the number of attempted suicides amongst students. The number of stress-related illnesses amongst students has exploded. And there is a link. Because I think we all make a very common mistake. We think, particularly with talented children, that they have everything. And one of the things you notice about children is this. If they've never failed in their lives, they are the ones who eventually fall the furthest. So with gifted athletes as children are better than anybody else. You know what I mean? There's always one football player in a school who is better than every other child, right? And they go through the system, and eventually they may join a professional football team. And suddenly at that level, they're surrounded by other people who are as good, if not better than they are. For the first time in their lives, they're facing a challenge. Because up until then, they've always won. And because they've never failed, they become terrified. They become really, really scared. And many of them can't cope, so they drop out. Of bright children in our schools, the ones that ace their tests, the ones that always come top in every exam, Those are the ones that go to Oxford and Cambridge and eventually try to kill themselves because they can't cope with the thought of failure. And it's one of the things I've talked about already this morning that I really, really want us to consider. How do we create environments where we make sure our children fail? We need to make sure our children have experience of failure, of making mistakes, of getting things wrong. We need to help our parents realize that pages in their books of ticks and correct answers has shown us nothing, that their child has not improved because they got everything right. How do we help our parents understand that it's the point of failure which builds the strength in our children? You know, you think about athletes again, and you think about the weight training that athletes do. And the whole thing about weight training is designed to break your muscles. Because the biology is that if you break your muscles, they repair stronger. And every time you put your muscle under pressure, it fractures a little bit, but the cells then grow to make it even stronger. So our job as teachers, I believe, is not to promote the idea that getting things right is the answer. Our job as teachers is to create environments where our children are challenged, but we're there to help them build stronger and stronger and stronger. Because what you see in success around the world, and I wrote a book about this called Simple Thinking. I explored the whole nature of success, and I was lucky. I got to interview amazing people, including, by the way, and I say this just to show off, I got to interview Jay-Z. So later, if you want to shake my hand, Jay-Z has shaken this hand too, and I've never washed it. Boom. Woo! The interesting thing about all of these people, when they talk about success, how much failure taught them, how many things they had to struggle with. Jay-Z had been fired from record labels. He'd been told he was never going to make it, and that just made him stronger because he'd come from a really difficult position. So one thing I want you to think about is this. Think about your classroom like a casino. This is about soul. This is about authenticity. This is about real education. Think about your class as a casino. Every day, your students come into your classroom and they're going to gamble their self-esteem with you. And you're like the croupier in the casino. You stand behind the roulette wheel. And every time you ask your students to engage with you in learning, you're asking them to risk some of their self-esteem. And what you do when you ask them a question or you set them a challenge is you spin the wheel and you roll the ball. And you say, come on, bet with me. Let's go. Let's do some learning together. And some of your students have walked into your classroom that morning like the high rollers. They've got hundreds of poker chips of self-esteem. You know the kids I mean? The kids we shouldn't hate, but we do. You know those kids. I know the answer. I know the answer. I've been there. I know. You know those kids we should be going, oh, you're so clever. But inside we're going, shut up. I hate you. You know, the other kids are thinking, we hate you. And you say, no, you don't. But inside you're thinking, I do too. Those kids. Hundreds of poker chips. And every time you ask them to engage with you in learning, they go, yeah, okay, I'll put 50 poker chips of my self-esteem on red, or on black, or on odd, or on even, or heck, because I'm so full of self-esteem, I'll put poker chips on one number. Those kids. And there's a few of them. And then there are many kids in your class that come in with a few poker chips and they'll play the game. Because if they put it on red and it comes up black, doesn't matter. They've got a few poker chips left. They'll keep playing. And then there's the kids. There's the kids at the back of your classroom. And they're looking at me, thinking, I'd love to play that game, but I can't, because I have one poker chip. And if I put that one poker chip of self-esteem on red, and it comes up black, I've got nothing left to give. And my point about that is this. Our first job as educators is to make sure that our students have enough poker chips to play the game. We can't just expect them to learn because we tell them to. We can't just expect them to learn because we threaten them, or bribe them, or punish them when they don't do what they're told. If we're serious about the soul of education, then our primary job is to build the self-esteem in our students so that they can play the game of learning, that they can enjoy learning, that they can live their lives. Our other job is to recognize that we as teachers need to do that first. You remember earlier I said to you that we need to model the behaviors we expect of our students. Maybe the first step for us as educators is to support each other and to support our colleagues to make sure that we have enough poker chips of self-esteem so that we're prepared to take risks, so that we're prepared to be creative. And then we can pass the gifts to our students. Look, I want to finish here with this thought for you, because I hope it brings it together, this whole passion for educating the soul first. Somebody asked me really recently if I could describe to them the job of a teacher simply. And this was my answer. See what you think. I said, we have two key responsibilities. The first is to help our children dream. Because many of our children don't dream. Because many of our children don't have the experiences that allow them to dream. Their dreams are simple and they're based on their own experiences. Our children's imaginations are often limited by the experiences they have. You know, how many of our children have had the chance to lie under a tree on a summer's day, feeling the grass tickle their neck, smelling the fields, seeing the leaves? At best these days, our children sit in front of computer screens. So we have to help our children dream, and by dreaming what I mean is we have to help them see the power of the future. We have to help them see what the world has out there for them. Because then they can start to dream. That's job number one. Job number two, and the real challenge of teaching, I believe, is this. How do we turn the dream into an aspiration? And let me explain the difference. A dream is a fantasy. We can all dream. I can dream about playing professional football. It's never going to happen. It's a fantasy. But to turn a dream into an aspiration, you have to build a ladder. You have to build a ladder which is real, so that children can climb towards that dream. And the way we as teachers build the ladder is each rung of the ladder is learning. It's developing resilience, developing self-confidence, transferring knowledge, bringing skills and attributes, curiosity and creativity. And that is the job of a teacher. So here's what I want you to think about for the rest of today. How do I help my children dream? And how do I turn those dreams into aspirations? Ladies and gentlemen, let me finish here by saying thank you once again. You are remarkable people, and you do a remarkable job. And by being here on a Saturday, you have done nothing but show your love for your students. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much indeed.